I'm J.G. Michael, and this is Parallax Views. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the program, we'll be hearing from first-time guest Tom Joseph of America's Main Street Party. But first, I want to remind you that this show is almost entirely listener-funded, with the exception of my one sponsor, Mike Swanson of WallStreetWindow.com. Highly recommend checking out WallStreetWindow.com free newsletter. You'll get great financial and trading news. I've actually had listeners make a return on investment thanks to Mike's trading tips. So head on over to WallStreetWindow.com and sign up for the Wall Street Window newsletter. Also, if you can, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. I hope to be picking up speed in the number of episodes I produce in the next few months, especially as we get into the political season. And we're going to be talking politics on this episode and the problem with the electoral system with Tom Joseph of America's Main Street Party. He believes that big donors have too much of an influence on our politics, that there's sort of a protection racket of sorts for incumbents, and that the average American isn't having their voice heard. How does he plan to fix that? Well, that's what America's Main Street Party is all about, and it's rather interesting the way it wants to use technology and an app to maybe address these issues. You'll have to listen to learn more, but I think you'll find the conversation fascinating. With that being said, hopefully I've whet your appetite and you'll enjoy the following conversation with Tom Joseph of America's Main Street Party. Welcome to Parallax Views. A guest that I'm very interested to be speaking with. Tom Joseph is one of the men behind the Main Street Party. And we're going to be talking about what the Main Street Party is and how he got into electoral reform activism and what the American Main Street Party can do. How are you doing, Tom Joseph?
I'm doing great, JG. Thanks so much for having me on your program.
So maybe we could start with getting a little bit into your background. My understanding is that you had an engineering degree from what, Carnegie Mellon, or?
Yes,
Okay.
mechanical engineer, but really I worked in factory automation for the first decade of my career.
I'm just curious, maybe you can tell me your bio a little bit and how that informed everything leading up to the foundation or formation of the Main Street Party. Well, like what drew you to this, I guess?
Well, I will say that, my life has been a couple happy accidents. 35 years ago, actually 40 years ago, I was trying to help my dad out with a bookkeeping problem at the dawn of the personal computer age. And I stumbled on this idea because my sister kind of bailed me out helping him with his bookkeeping. And I thought, probably, people that want flexibility, primarily working women, could support 5-10 businesses this way. And that's when I came up with the idea of Bookminders. That was 1984. I launched it in 1991, really at the dawn of the internet. And, spent a long time, convincing people that this was the new model. But once it caught on, the idea of people working from home, servicing multiple businesses, caught on. But it was really an engineering approach. I'm not an accountant. I'd one accounting course in my life and I got a C in it. But I built, one of the biggest accounting firms, of its kind. Nobody's really been able to scale outsourced bookkeeping like we have at Bookminders. We're now in, I think, 6 or 7 states, have over 100 employees, 500 clients, and we're kind of like a boutique bookkeeping service. We handle complex for-profit businesses and nonprofits, which are all very complex. But about 5-6 years ago, during the COVID, I'd been retired. We have a great CEO, but I was worried. Nobody knew what was going to go on. And when I applied for PPP money for Bookminders, I made a decision that if I survived the COVID financially and with my health, that I wanted to do something, pay it forward. But I knew I was too old to really run for office or change any laws. I wanted to figure out if there was a way to kind of break the system with a new kind of political party. And it took me a couple of years to really figure out how to do it. But basically, I'm using our entire political committee system in a very different way to deliver a fair nominating process. The idea being if the politicians won't fix the primary in the general election, let's come up with our own primary and and use that. And
Well, but before I want to get into what the Main Street Party's sort of plan of action is, what its proposals are for changing things. But I guess in some ways, I felt reading over the website that you're sort of arguing that the real problem in American politics is not necessarily, oh, it's the Republicans or it's the Democrats, but almost that the real problem is that there's this incentive structure created by money and other factors that sort of corrupts the political process and keeps we the people, so to speak, from having our voices heard.
absolutely, you actually you nailed it on the head. The issue is that money corrupts the process, and money protects incumbents, and money means that there's no system of accountability. Because the people, at the very highest parts of both parties are really pulling the strings on how your representatives vote. And, if we're frustrated why politicians put party ahead of the country, it's the incentive system that we created. So what I'm doing is changing that incentive system. The thing that has currency in our system is not money, it's endorsements from constituents in the district. That's the only thing that has value in the system is getting somebody to approve of your nomination. And by using a tool called approval voting, that in the early rounds, when you have lots of contestants in it, that you can vote for as many as that approve of. And that way, it allows more moderate candidates to advance through the contest. And our approach is really just to do this in uncompetitive districts, that we don't really need to go into swing districts. And it probably may not work in what we would call naturally uncompetitive districts, but gerrymandered districts where opposition voices have been kind of buried. This is a way to bring those voices to life. And also to bring moderate voices within the current parties, that are controlling those districts, to give them more power to say that, hey, we want to be more pink, more baby blue, less ruby red, navy blue. So it's really about determining, the shade of red or blue in these districts and allowing other factions to form in Congress that would be a balancing, a neutralizing force.
So take us through what are the ways in which the Main Street Party would propose to change the sort of incentive structure or push back against the incentive structures we currently have for our political system?
Well, right now, the way the law works, as soon as somebody either declares that they're going to run for Congress, start spending money, they have to form a political committee and they become basically um, subject to donors, donors' wills. And the loophole I found is that if the people who want to be in Congress don't spend any money, a political party can do whatever it wants to determine who its nominee is. So if you create a moneyless contest within the party and you allow the entire district to participate in it, you've basically created an alternate primary system, a way to elevate, a candidate amongst maybe 100 candidates that have not only enter, but they've stated their position on 7 issues that local committee that's running the contest says that you have to weigh in on these 7 things so the voters actually can figure out who you are. And right now, they don't need to do that. All they have to do is say, I'm an R or I'm a D. And you hope you're you hope you're getting what you want.
So it sounds like you're saying that the issue at hand for you isn't necessarily even one of politics. It's almost, well, it's what you said earlier. You come from that engineering background. Do we have an engineering problem when it comes to how our political system is set up? Is that sort of how you see it?
We have a design flaw, absolutely.
Right.
The incentive system is wrong. And that was one thing when I started Bookminders, I said, if we're going to employ people to work from home, we have to have a different incentive structure. We don't pay by the hour. We have a formulaic way of paying. And because we changed the incentive structure, frankly, it works really well. And I think the same thing applies here. Right now, the incentive is for politicians to perform on TV for donors. That's why we see this ridiculous behavior. It's stuff that the population in general turns them off. But I think if we created something where, people really have to earn endorsements from actual constituents to win a nomination, it will change the game entirely.
So essentially, I want to get this right. It's almost like you're saying fix the incentives first. And if you do that, we'll probably see better policy outcomes afterwards from whoever is elected.
Well, one is that Congress may actually start working like it's supposed to work. I mean, we're not supposed to wait till presidents get elected and then get big super packages that go behind. This is the opposite of what the framers put together. The legislation is supposed to bubble up from Congress, and then the president either approves or vetoes. We flip things around, and what we need to do is really put the factions back into Congress, more than two. I want to create four. I want to create a pink and a baby blue caucus. So if we run enough of these contests and get enough, I don't believe in a purple contest. There's going to be a liberal, unaffiliated to the party and party money caucus and a conservative caucus that's not tied to Republican money that will actually balance power in Congress and put them back to work.
If I have listeners that are confused by those terms you're using, like a pink and a baby blue, can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, right now there are, there are caucuses within the parties, the Freedom Caucus, the Progressive Caucus. They meet and they're supposed to balance things out, but it really, because the money binds all those folks together, they wind up voting in mass. I mean, we never see it's like, oh, this isn't going to pass, and it passes. And and it happens on both sides. And back in the 50s and 60s, there was actually a conservative faction of the Democratic Party and a liberal faction of the Republican Party, and it actually balanced things out. We had one of the most productive Congresses post World War II. Both parties wanted to nominate the same president. Eisenhower wanted, both Democrats and Republicans wanted to nominate Eisenhower. That's how balanced things were and how great government was working. But since we've gone full bore two party, things are falling apart.
Now, do you want to talk about the app and this concept of how to find a consensus nominee? I think it's in 3 steps is how the website puts it.
Yes. The first step, well, I'll back it up. I mean, number one, we're not looking to run this everywhere. The goal at this point is to attract a super PAC that would basically give the funds to the winner for the expensive part of the general election campaign. The super PAC would fund the media campaign. The local candidate would fund their ground campaign. But prior to this contest coming into the district, the super PAC would pick either 5, 10, 5 red, 5 blue, 10 red, 10 blue, but an equal number of districts, both gerrymandered red and blue. And if one of those districts happened to be yours, you'd be getting public service announcements months in advance of this explaining, hey, download the app, learn about this. If you're interested in running for Congress, here's what you need to do. If you're interested in volunteering and being on the local committee, here's how to do it. But in 3 months preparation, getting ready for this alternate primary system to run. But the plan would be to run our primary in parallel with the public primary, and to basically see if we can outperform it, mean getting more people to vote in our primary than vote in the public primary. And because we do it over 5 rounds, we can think we can do it. The first set of rounds, the first 3 rounds, are what we're calling the endorsement rounds, where we use approval voting. Let's suppose it's free and equal, and it's relatively easy to get in. We have 100 candidates in this contest. You're thinking that's overwhelming. How are people ever going to find that? because the candidates have weighed in on those 7 issues, we want the constituents then to go in and do the same thing, that they would go through these questions that you can see in the demo, that we've put 2 global, 3 national, 2 local issues for our hypothetical. The real districts, PA1 and PA2, but all the candidates in there are avatars that are created by AI. But you can go in and we more or less say, hey, in a red district, we feel like this is going to be the distribution of the candidates on these issues. But you'd go and say, hey, here's where I feel on Iran. This is what I think about borders. And you'd be able to see which ones match up with your views. And you could go in and look at their profiles, or since we have 100 candidates now, you could just endorse them all and see who makes the top 20. So you can click on that button at the top of the app if you go to our website, and it'll take you to the next round, and you'll be able to see, okay, which of these 100 candidates made it to top 20? Did any of mine make it to the top 20? But now you're starting to get a feel for how this works, that you can go in, see where these candidates stand on the issues, and imagine now you're a liberal in a conservative district. You actually have a voice here, because there are going to be some of these candidates that match you because they're moderate. They're taking moderate positions on some of the issues, maybe more conservative positions on other issues. So this is the power of the app, that now liberals in a conservative district, conservatives in a liberal district actually can put their finger on the scale of who advances out of that contest. It won't be a Democrat or a liberal, but it may be more of a pink conservative than a ruby red conservative. Flip it around for the other. So the app, if you go into this, is just a demo and it's not functional, but you can see that each potential nominee has a bio, their own public service announcement. They can run for Congress without spending money. They can convey their message. You'll probably get way more content through this than you would from a 15-second or 30-second ad on television. You can actually see this and look and compare them side by side. You're on
So
mute.
who who are you hoping? I don't want to word it that way. I guess I want to ask you, who is this appealed to so far, and how do you how would you pitch this to, say, someone who has very, I don't want to say extremist, but like hardline views, left or right? Like they're very firm in their beliefs. And like I said, I don't mean extreme, just they have very firm beliefs, and they're like, well, I want my sort of policies to go forward. Where
It's
it's almost like politics is a war for some people.
For the people that are tuned into their channels, they're probably not interested in it. They're probably pretty happy with the system, or they love the hate that it generates. I mean, I do think that there's a certain amount of this that people just are into the furor. But there is a lot of people that want something different. And, I can just tell by the reception of podcast hosts. I mean, I'm getting on podcasts easily. And there's just interest within the market for something different. So that's who appealed. And the other thing, this isn't an ideological party. Think of this as a tech company disrupting a market. And the way they do that is they do it by finding early adopters. Our early adopters will be these target districts. We don't have to convince the country. We just have to, if I find my venture capitalist is a super PAC, if I find that venture capitalist is going to fund this to happen in, 5 red, 5 blue, or 10 red, 10 blue, all we have to do is have some success there so we can show the rest of the nation how this works. And we can have enough success in one cycle that we push the election of the speaker into the main chamber. Right now, the whole trick is that if you win a majority of Congress, that they can caucus outside of the chamber, which is not the way it's supposed to work. Pick a party leader to be the Speaker of the House. Then they go into the House and they vote for him. The way the Constitution is written is they're supposed to elect the Speaker of the House in the main chamber, not do it beforehand. But if you create, 2 more factions and make it so that neither party can elect the Speaker outside the House, the person that's going to be elected, if they do that in the main chamber, is going to be from a swing district, a moderate district. There's no way they're going to agree on somebody who's an extremely staunchly left or right. And that would be historic.
So, are there any misconceptions that people have had about the Main Street Party that you would want to clear up? I mean, it's funny because
There's
you said
no
it was.
conceptions that people have. But I mean,
Oh,
the issue is that, it's right now getting the word out. I mean, it got to the point just at the end of last year where we really tried to market it to the mainstream media, really finding no penetration within the mainstream media. But once we started going in this podcast route, I don't know, I'm up over 70, maybe 70 to 80 podcasts over the last 4 or 5 months, which is pretty a lot of interest. I know there's a lot of podcasts out there, but only certain ones are interested in political stuff. And um, I I often are on these podcasts and cannot tell the ideological leanings of the host because it's a curious thing that how does this work? Why is it better? And we never get into like culture stuff.
Well, I guess are there any aspects of the Main Street Party and what it wants to do that maybe, because I think this is very complex. There's even aspects of the website I had to read it a few times to sort of get the gist. Are there any aspects you think are particularly important that you want people to understand and not, like, how would you boil down some of the more complex aspects of what you're saying?
I think this is the best thing to say. Think about how we choose the Olympic team. I mean, if we choose our Olympic team like we pick Congress, we're not winning any gold medals. We're probably not winning any medals. And you have to earn a spot on the Olympic team. You have to really be able to perform. And we have people that are literally dying in office that are in old age homes and they're winning their seats easily. That tells you something right there. So, what the national party really is like I said, this tech company is distributing a portal and app. It allows local committees to run a contest and make sure it fits their district and people feel like they have ownership in the process. And it puts control now of those local committees over the people that ultimately win that seat. Because one part of this deal is that if to get that super PAC funding for the general election, the contest winner has to agree to make somebody on that local committee the treasurer of their committee, and they will either spend down that money or return any excess election funds back to the local committee. There's no war chests in this system. No war chests. The other rule is that even if a really wealthy person wins the contest, they cannot put more money in than any other average citizen. I know it sounds crazy, but if we're going to return sanity, we can't let people buy their office. You can't buy a spot in the Olympic team. Okay, yachting.
Well, no,
Equestrian.
no, I find this really interesting. So it, it sounds like you really want to use technology or apps and sort of online platforms to change things.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean,
Uh,
it's what your generation expect. I'm 65. I don't know how old you are, but you're not my generation. It's really what the succeeding generations expect now. And, they're using MGM Grand app and Venmo and doing online banking. And they're wondering, really, we can't use this technology to weigh in? You're making me get in my car and go to a poll or fill out this stupid ballot, mail it in. I mean, it's not, the whole thing is that, before I understand we're really limited in having an election, we can have an actual multi-round contest. And I think until you do that, it's not it won't work. And the primary is supposed to be part of that. But if in gerrymandered districts, it's whoever wins the primary wins the general election. And it's almost always the incumbent winning the primary, and only like 100,000 people show up to vote in a primary. So, they wonder why the party endorsed candidates always win these primaries because the only people show up for the elections are the staunch Republicans and Democrats for primaries.
so I guess to play a devil's advocate question here, how would, say, the Main Street Party's app prevent manipulation or like coordinated campaigns, things of that nature?
How do we make sure that people follow the rules? Is
Right.
basically
That's what I'm
and
asking. Yes.
I mean, I do think that we can count, and I think there's a way to use like I worked in manufacturing, and basically you make data visible, and it gives people confidence in the information. So not necessarily saying that JG voted, but we could have a dot on a map that had your house on it and showed a green dot, and then you could look at that and say, yeah, that was me, or somebody say that no, JG died 3 weeks ago. That can't be him. And so there's ways that you can visualize this and give people faith that you have data integrity. The other thing is that, it's moneyless contest. if people spend money, it'll be pretty obvious. It'll be an ad, a sign, So if there's no physical evidence of a campaign, they're following the rules. If there's physical evidence of a campaign, it's easy to see they broke the rules and they're kicked out of the contest. But I think we have to get to the point here where we take responsibility for how this process works. And we've trusted the Republicans and Democrats with a really important process. And unfortunately, they've stolen it from us. They hijacked the election system and have something that works really well for them to get reelected, but it doesn't really work well for the people, and the country is not getting in better shape.
A lot of your proposals, a lot of it would push for equal exposure of candidates rather than focusing on fundraising. Can you speak to that the importance of equal exposure?
Well, this all gets back to, when the constitutions were written. I have another initiative called Wilson's Fountain. It's named after James Wilson. James Wilson added the words "and equal" to what had previously been a free election clause. So I think it's 1689 English Bill of Rights. I might have the date wrong, but they the English determined that elections should be free, meaning that anybody should be able to run. Anybody, that meant somebody owned land, but but it still is a big stretch from everything being about royalty. But 100 years later, when Wilson was rewriting the Pennsylvania Constitution, he thought it's not enough for elections to be free; they have to be equal, they have to be fair, and he referred to free and equal elections as the original fountain of democracy, meaning that if it well got tainted, it poisoned all aspects of the state. And he saw that this was really the most vital thing, that the elections be fair. And I don't know how anybody can look at what we have now and say it's anything even close to being fair. I mean, like, if you say, is it fair between Republicans and Democrats? Maybe, but fair for anybody to be a part of a government of the people, by the people, for the people? No, that's just not happening.
Now, your plan, it would still involve a super PAC after the nomination process. And I know there's going to be people say, well, is that really that different from the current system? So I want you to get into that because I do think it is different, but I want you to sort of explain why.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I came up with this concept, I went working with election attorneys, and I said, I think this is to be the only super PAC for the common good. Like the way I have it, like you have one super PAC that's funding both winners, red and blue. And there was one of the attorneys said, hey, well, what if somebody comes in and represents big oil or something, puts money in the super PAC? I said, why would they do that? Their money's getting spread across both sides. I said, you as somebody who's a partisan influence, number one, it's getting, but and number two, you have no influence on who the actual candidate is. So the super PACs more or less saying, hey, I'm backing, as long as you guys in district whatever turn out in numbers, you give me some faith that backing this candidate will make sense, um, they'll back whoever they pick. And I think that has to be the condition. So it would be the first super PAC for the common good, a very unique implementation of a super PAC. And with the recent Supreme Court ruling about how parties can now directly endorse, even the super PAC goes away, I think with this recent ruling, the party itself could actually back the candidates. But I like the system where there's like three different entities. There's the local committee, the national party, which is us, and the super PAC is being kind of like a check and balance on the entire system. We could say, hey, the contest, they broke the rules, it wasn't free and equal. Then the super PAC doesn't back them. The super PAC say, hey, they didn't turn out numbers. We need at least 50,000 or 100,000 people voting at the final for you to be backed. So these types of things could actually make the system work better rather than it being one monolithic organization.
So one of the things that's interesting about your website, and I wasn't familiar with this before, was that it's operating under the Wilson's Fountain paradigm. Can you explain what that is for my listeners that may be unfamiliar?
Well, a lot this has to go with the rules on money. A political party, what I have, America's Main Street Party, the 527 committee. I can only donate $5,000 a year to, and nobody can donate more than $5,000 a year to it. So I've tried to keep the activities within that very limited to developing the software and to marketing America's Main Street Party. But there's a lot of other work that needed to be done. So I formed an entity to do that research. And it's kind of like as long as we don't mention America's Main Street Party, it's fine. But I'm not within Wilson's Fountain. If you go on that website, it says the National Party. That's really America's Main Street Party. But Wilson's Fountain is just is defining how these different entities work, how the super PAC operates, what the National Party does, how the local committees work, and what the candidate committees do. So Wilson's Fountain is kind of the repurposing of our political committee system, and it's the definition of that and the research behind that. And I used college students in Philadelphia to do a lot of that work because, frankly, nobody else would work on it. But they were interested in, theoretically in what it was about. Then the activities within America's Main Street Party, mainstreetparty.org, is the actual app. But if you can go to either site and kind of learn about that, it's wilsonsfountain.us. The .us account is about public education. So everything I'm doing within Wilson's Fountain is all public domain. This is not for commercial purposes. It's really just to explain how everything works. And then the party is really just about the app, the tech company.
You said you did some work with students in, did you say Philadelphia?
Yes.
Can you talk more about that? I'm wondering what the actual collaboration sort of on the groundwork is to figure this stuff out.
Well, what happened, I formed the committee, I was like, where do you put the headquarters? And I'm in Pennsylvania. I thought, I'm going to put it in Philadelphia. It's just kind of a random decision. Then a couple of years into it, I needed to get this research done. And I'd stumbled upon this founder, James Wilson, who I'd never heard of. Most people never have. He's buried in history. But he was from Philadelphia, and he actually did the first law lecture, what became University of Pennsylvania. So I thought it'd be interesting to, well, recruit kids from Penn. And I did recruit a couple political science majors, both are in law school right now, who researched basically my idea, the law of it, and wrote a paper operating Wilson's Fountain within the Federal Election Commission regulations. But it's really kind of the roadmap of how we would do this. And then subsequently from that, there was other research papers that were written. One that basically talks about the long-term impact of free and equal elections, both economically and on the structure within Congress. But those types of research papers are in Wilson's Fountain. I hired two interns from Drexel to code up the prototype. They worked for the Main Street Party. The guy from Haverford, Chauncey, who he may have contacted you to line up this podcast.
No, Chauncey was
Chauncey,
great in helping set this up. Yeah.
yeah. Chauncey wrote the spec. Chauncey designed the app, basically. The guys from Drexel programmed it, and we've since had it work with another organization to make sure it can map into a secure mobile voting platform. And now I have a software firm in Pittsburgh that's really stood it up the rest of the way to make it kind of something that you can play with. The original prototype was something we could demonstrate but not use. This one's a usable demo. And amazing what we are able to do now with AI to probably something that may cost six figures, we were able to done for less than $20,000.
We talked a little bit earlier about the issue of money in politics, but I think another aspect that you're trying to go after, and I think it's part of the party's focus, is focusing on these uncompetitive districts, because I think one of your big arguments is in order to clean up, the House of Representatives, you need to change this system where there's these safe districts where the majority party just rolls and there's no disruption.
Yeah, and it's like 85% now. It's 85 to 90% of House members run for re-election will win. And it's really only, 10% across four. It's like 40 some districts that will decide which way Congress swings.
Well, can you talk more about that strategy going forward?
Sure. What we're looking for specifically are so I'm ruling out this year, but looking at the results this year for incumbents, long-term incumbents that won with 70 to 80% of the vote. So in that district, there's enough opposition votes. It's not like it's completely uncompetitive. We're at 90%. There's enough opposition votes to put their fingers on the scale, but not so many that they have a shot of winning if you split the vote in half. So what you want to do is say that, hey, if they've got 70 to 80% of the vote, if we split the conservative or liberal vote in half in that district, the other side still doesn't have a chance. You know what I mean? That they're only working with 20 to 30%. So even if we can't be a spoiler. We don't want to go in a district where it's, 55-45. We split one of the votes in half and now the other side like easily wins. That's not disruptive. That's just screwing up the system. But we want to get to the point where we understand that sweet spot. And what was interesting, I over this last year, I was looking at all the representatives that were over 70 years of age and what their win margins were, and they almost all fit within this band on both sides. It's almost like they have formulas. The Republican formula is a little bit lower in terms of what they are at. The Democrats, we're all in this, but all these senior citizen representatives were comfortably winning. They look like most of them are in gerrymandered districts.
So I think a big aspect of this is restoring people's or voters' voice, right?
In interest.
Okay.
I mean, it's boring. I don't think people take interest in the primary because it's not a contest.
And a lot of times they're only looking at the R or the D next to the name.
Yeah, now it'll matter.
Okay. Well, I want to delve more into that. So I don't know if I could give an example, but if you have a voter that has a certain set of issues that they care about, let's say labor protections for workers, or if they're I don't know, any number of issues, how would this help their voice be heard if they have pet issues?
There is the seven issues are the things that we're focusing in on in
Okay.
terms of it being formulaic, but there are places for them to state positions on other aspects of this. And again, right now, to find that information out for all these candidates, plus you wonder whether it's even worth a shot, time to spend investigating candidates if the person with the money behind them is the one that wins. And I think we've almost come to this point where it's like, okay, who has the biggest pot of money? They're going to win. And, that's the media just kind of backs them that way.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of young people have is it's the same candidates over and over and over. Um, and I hate to use the I know some people complain that it's almost like a gerontocracy. It's always the same old candidates. Uh,
It's not almost. It's not
right.
almost a
I'm trying to be
bureaucracy.
nice about it.
Hey, no, we are my generation too long in house. They need to step down. And this idea of just dying in office is just silly. I mean, we are not getting a good work product from this Congress.
Well, can you talk more about that, the importance? Because I feel like the party really wants, as you put it, fresh and viable candidates to be produced. Talk about the importance of that to the party's sort of principles and ideas.
I'm not sure they do want fresh and viable. I mean, I think the people want fresh and viable
No, but I'm
candidates.
saying
I
your
think
your party, I think, does.
oh, yes, yes, yes,
I was
absolutely.
asking
And
about your, yeah.
yeah, yeah. The the problem with the current system is that, if you're running against an incumbent, you don't look like a winner. And we feel like if we have something where somebody survives a gauntlet, 5 rounds, that now they look like a winner. And it's just like in football, somebody wins the SEC versus somebody who just was an at-large bid and didn't really earn. Who are you betting on? And we want to make sure that people understand that surviving and winning this contest is way harder than just going up and sucking up to donors.
Can you talk a little bit about how this app and the work you're doing would prevent, say, uh, overuse of money on, say, like advertising? Because you're saying that you have to use um, you can only use money from inside this sort of portal that you're using, and you're able to
Well, you
detect
can't,
if that's
during
not
the
being done.
nominating contest, you cannot use money at all to run. You
Right.
have to use the
Okay.
tools of the portal. You can, still be on Facebook or social media. You can do what you can go out, but there are going to be rules about how you're able to engage with the public. And So there will be no money through that process. And
Okay, I was
one of the
confused
things,
about that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah, so there's no money in that during our primary does not involve money. It's a moneyless primary system. And the but after the primary, once somebody wins it, then they need backing from the super PAC to run against the winner of the public primary.
So really the candidate is chosen by, the voters before the super PAC support comes in, which then changes the game entirely.
That is what is game changing about the way we use the super PAC.
Okay.
And you think about it, I don't, there's definitely people with money on the left and right that put money into the super PACs. There's also people with money in the middle. I have to find them. And the person who funds this, or the people that fund this, could go down in history as those who capitalized a more perfect union. I mean, this is, politicians may have thought it was a good idea to have super PACs that have infinite power, but having an entity like that in our model, be able to go in and basically apply that money to who the people chose. I think it's going to be a powerful combination.
I think the other issue that people will agree with you on, and maybe this is drawing more people to the Main Street Party. I assume that this is one of the big issues that causes people to uh, discover your work is the gerrymandering problem. How big is that issue for the Main Street Party addressing the gerrymandering issue?
It's the only issue. I mean, it is really what motivated me to get involved in this. It's something I've been thinking about for 3 decades, and ever since I started thinking about politics on the side, it always really bugged me about gerrymandering. And I thought that this is the place where the system can be broken. And I think the combination of that mathematical inequity and the application of technology in multiple rounds, I think it's a moneyball way to break the system.
Before we close out, is there anything I've sort of missed or overlooked that you think is really important for my listeners to understand about what the Main Street Party is trying to accomplish?
No, I think you've asked a lot of great questions. We've covered, I think, pretty much the full gamut. People are always asking about the security. We're looking. There's 3 different platforms out there now that are delivering secure mobile voting using encryption, making sure basically more. I think more secure than a lot of the balloting equipment that's out there that's more than 10 years old. But so we're looking at integrating with an application called Votes. Votes was developed over 8 years ago, looking to solve the problem like what do you do with service members that are on a submarine or in a war zone that can't get a physical ballot out? And they
Oh,
solved that
wow.
problem. And
Yeah.
so it's been used for the military for quite a long time, and it's being expanded to be used in other states. Votes apparently was just approved to be used in the whole province of Ontario for elections for the general public. So secure mobile voting is happening. It's happening in other countries faster than it's happening here, but this is something that could really help advance this. And again, ours isn't an election system, we're a nominating system. So what a great sandbox to kind of prove out some of these things. And maybe we do get hacked, but we'll figure out how to prevent it. And we can always just rerun the contest if one of the rounds is bad.
I like that word you use there, sandbox. Is that sort of how, how important is it for the Main Street Party to sort of experiment and go outside the sort of box that we've been in?
Well, and think of it, we have complete freedom to make these changes right now within the public election system. If you want to implement ranked choice voting, you got to get to the legislature. They're probably going to push again. You might have to have a ballot initiative. The fact that we can just tweak the system next revision, but because user feedback is that they don't like ranked choice, they'd rather have pick two. We're going to operate like a company that's servicing customers instead of what the parties don't treat constituents like customers. We want to change the whole experience.
Just two more questions I had here, and the first one is where would you like to see first and foremost the Main Street Party and the work you're doing? Where would you like to see it in, say, 5 years, 10 years? Where where do you want to take this? and what goals do you hope to have reached in the next few years? And what effect do you want that to have on the American system more broadly? And I just mean in pragmatic terms, where do you think the next steps are?
Sure. So this is a 6-year plan. Like I said, I think we missed the window for 2026. I think for 2028, I'd like to be going after 20 red, 20 blue districts to have that super PAC funding, to have the product ready to, launch, that it's been tested, beaten up, that the users have confidence even before we participate in those contests in 2028. What I'd like to do in 2030 is expand that to more seats in the US House and go after some seats in the US Senate. And in 2032, if we have enough saturation of the app, we could conduct a nationwide primary for the presidency where everybody weighs in on the same day over multiple rounds. None of this, somebody has to wait till the president is decided before they even get to vote. I mean, this way the presidential primary works is even sillier than the way the House primary works.
And the last question I wanted to ask you is, so as I told you before we started recording, I have listeners both on the left and the right. The interesting thing is they tend to be more populist than anything else, whether they're left or right. And it seems like we are in this populist moment. Do you see that sort of populism as being part of America's mainstream party? And do you think there is a sort of opportunity for America's Main Street Party and people like yourself to sort of seize this moment where there is sort of just this generalized aggravation with the flaws in the system right now?
Well, this being our 250th birthday gives us time to reflect on what the founders tried to do. And they were doing something very unique, which was popular sovereignty, which was the power of the governments derived from the people. Right now, there's, I think, a disconnect between the political elite who run the system and big money and the actual people who, like I said, are kind of going through the motions of voting for people that they really didn't put on the ballot. So yeah, I think this is the opportunity. Technology makes this practical and a lot less cost effective. But if we were committed to it 100 years ago, it's really about being fair, and the system we have now is not really fair.
Well, I want to thank you again, Tom Joseph, for coming on Parallax Views. How can my listeners keep up with the Main Street Party? And what do you hope my listeners get out of this conversation, if there's one thing?
Well, that there's a brand new way. I mean, there's a way that's coming down the pipe, and to spread the word. I mean, we'd like to get traction. If you go to mainstreetparty.org, try out the app, share it. Yeah, we need to get a following. The word is just getting out, so and it takes time to build things. So yeah, mainstreetparty.org. And then if you want to learn about the entire system, it's wilsonsfountain.us.
A special thanks to my $10 and above tier supporters on Patreon, who make this show possible with their generous donations. Producers credits shout out to those supporters: Aaron, Fabian, Jeremy, Matt, Big Bob's Beepers, James, Enoch, David, Sadad, Tristan, Bob, Eva, Miriam, West Bank Robbery Pod, B. Lund, Transnatural Perspectives Podcast, Dan, Nick, Elliot, Fabian, Tom, Arlen, Bo, Spartacus, James, G, Jamie, Will, JC, WV, Sutra, Orc, Catherine, Aaron, Darko, Nathan, Holland, Dan, Mark, Chase, Olm, Gary, Nobody, Emilia, Nick, Brace, Michael, and Brian. Please join those listeners in supporting me at the $10 and above tier of my Patreon page, patreon.com/parallaxviews, if you'd like your very own producer's credit on each and every edition of the program. Until next time, You've been listening to Parallax Views with Parallax Views to Parallax Views with Parallax Views.
The way out is not simply to say don't do it, just to prohibit. It's nothing else. If we don't do it, others will be doing it like crazy. So, we have to confront the problem. But no, basically, I know of the great anxieties, problems, new forms of control, but it's also new forms of freedom. This is why I always emphasize that internet and all this new digital stuff, it's a very ambiguous phenomenon, but it's the field of struggle. New forms of enslavement, but at the same time, new incredible forms of freedom. We have to accept the fight with no nostalgia for old, allegedly more authentic communities or whatever. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.